Well, hello there, cat people. Dan the Catman here, and welcome to episode 36 of the Sheltercats podcast, my labor of feline love. The Sheltercats podcast, if you don't already know, is all about shelter cats. The cats that have made a difference in my life, have saved my life, all about the people that make a difference in the lives of everyday shelter cats, be they people that have made films about cats, be they people that work in shelters, work in rescues, have fostered cats, have made any difference whatsoever in the lives of a shelter cat. Their stories will be heard on my show. And hopefully that will serve as an inspiration to get you to adopt a cat of your own, or if you have one, another. Adopt, don't shop. Right now as I'm speaking to you, there is an amazing cat in a shelter, in a rescue, in a foster, or even on the street, on your block, waiting to be your amazing cat and to make a difference in your life. So please adopt, don't shop. And the whole point of this podcast is to give voice to people, not only to tell my stories, but to give voice to people that are inspired to do something to shed light on how amazing everyday shelter cats are. And today's guest, definitely is an awesome example of just that very thing. Just someone who has a love of regular cats and turned that into something amazing. And that's wonderful, which means I'm hearing from so many people, and I'm able to just come across people that I wouldn't have never been able to do had I not started my little podcast. So, with that being said, I want to hear from you. If you run a shelter, if you volunteer at a shelter, if you are just a trapper, if you feed colonies, if you do anything to better the lives of a shelter cat, or if you just have an amazing shelter cat of your own, I want to hear from you, and I want to have you on the show, because your story about your cats deserves to be told. Because the more stories, the more people that hear about how amazing cats are, hopefully more people will help by adopting, by donating, by volunteering, by opening their homes to fosters. So, how do you find me? Well, the website is tylerthecat.com. The email for me is dan@tylerthecat.com. You can find me on Facebook. Just search for the page Shelter Cats. I am on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. Just search Shelter Cats Podcast. I'm on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, Shelter Cats Pod, so Shelter Cats POD. I am on YouTube. Just search Shelter Cats. There's a little page where I have the audio and small video related to the show. So if you're a YouTuber like I am, you could watch/listen to the show on YouTube. And I have a Medium blog. I blog every Saturday, sheltercats.medium.com. And if you want, but you don't have to, you could support the show on Spotify and Patreon. Just look for the $ symbol on Spotify and search for Shelter Cats on Patreon. So with that being said, I got an email from the PR manager for a wonderful producer and director whose name is Ross Hewitt, who you'll be hearing my discussion with on today's show. Ross Hewitt is an actor, playwright, director, producer, and retired physician who received many awards for his work with the HIV and AIDS communities. He's an associate member of the American Dramatists Guild and a past member of the Village Playwrights. He produced full-length plays such as When October Goes, Rainbows and Ribbons, and Echoes in the Garden. Ross directed the world premiere of Shawn Nacol's The Trophy Wife, An Evening of Sonnets, Booties, and A Supportive Wife. His first foray into film is as the screenwriter and producer of the award-winning children's animated short film and the subject of tonight's show, Kris the Cat. Just an amazing story of how a short little writing prompt about an old Icelandic folktale led Ross down an awesome path to producing the film about Kris, with a K, the cat. And tonight, on this episode, you'll hear that story. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ross Hewitt, the producer of the animated short film, Kris the Cat. Enjoy. Hello, Ross.
Hello, Dan.
Hi, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Shelter Cats podcast. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thank you so much for joining me. It was a very pleasant surprise to get the email from Liberty, so I'm very glad you're on the show.
I'm happy to be here.
So just in case you don't know my little podcast, it's really about how everyday cats can make a big difference in people's lives, and also about the people that help make a difference for everyday shelter cats. So your story and your Kris the Cat definitely appealed to me because it sounds like right up my alley, pardon the pun. So I guess to begin, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ross Hewitt. I am a retired physician, but I have had a love of storytelling and theater and writing for a very long time. And I wrote a short story based on a writing prompt about an old Icelandic folktale, and that ended up turning into Kris the Cat.
That's wonderful. And I have a note here that you had 13 cats growing up.
Yes. So this was back in the day when there weren't really organized shelters.
Right.
There may have been the ASPCA back in New York at that time, because I grew up in the Bronx. But my mother just took in cats, basically. And so slowly but surely, we acquired them one after another. And eventually we ended up with 7. And she neglected to get the last 2 spayed. So next thing you know, they had a litter of 6 and we had 13.
Oh, wow. Fun fact, I grew up near Coney Island in Brooklyn, so.
And we kept them all. We kept them all until I was away at college, and then we split. I took some of them. My sister took some. My mother couldn't keep any because she was moving to a place where there was dogs. So she placed all the rest of them, which is quite amazing. But that was the story of our cats and our cat family, and 12 of them slept in my parents' king-size bed with them.
Wow.
One slept underneath because she was a scaredy cat. But yeah, so I would, as a kid, I would go in to wake up my parents in the morning like all kids do, and they'd be covered with cats all over the bed.
That sounds like heaven to me. I have 5, and at least 3 to 4 are frequently in my. It's not a king size, but they're frequently taking up most of the space. So that definitely resonates with me. So that love of cats kind of, how did you, what I'm curious about is the folk tale, how did you become aware of it, and how did that inspire you to turn it into this short film?
Well, I responded to a writing prompt. This is before the pandemic, about stories about Iceland. They were having an Icelandic festival in California, and they wanted to publish a little kind of handbook of stories to go along with it. And so I didn't know anything about Iceland or Icelandic stories. So I thought, well, let me see what are some of the folk tales from Iceland. And just internet research led me to a couple of different sites, and I started reading various folk tales, and I came across one about a commoner who responds to the king's request to help rid his castle of vermin, and because the king did not know what to do. And so this commoner brings a cat and gifts a cat to the king. And the king is, of course, eternally grateful because the cat, in fact, cleared the castle of the vermin. And so the king said to the commoner, "What can I offer you as a reward?" "Well, let me think. You can either have a nice big farm and a plot of land, or you can marry my daughter." And in a tale of Scandinavian practicality, the commoner says, "I will marry your daughter." And of course, becomes king later on. And so that was the folktale. But that got me thinking, what happened to the cat? And that inspired me to then create the tale of Kris the Cat, who ends up getting lost in the woods because he gets taken away by accident from the castle, and how he ends up finding love and friends along the way.
That's I would have never thought to connect that into such a wonderful story, and it's such a vibrant film. I really enjoyed it. It actually caught the attention of one of my cats who is attracted to TV. So it actually had a human and a feline audience. One of my cats, I put YouTube on for her, and she was like, what are you watching? I'm going to watch that with you." So
that's great. One of my 13 cats, Eugene, used to chase the basketball during basketball games on TV.
that you just, the rest of them look at the TV. I don't know what you're staring at, but my Mona is enthralled by YouTube. I usually leave YouTube on for her.
That's amazing.
So your film is also feline approved.
Thank you.
So why do you think that cats make great storytellers? Why do you think that cats are good sort of protagonists? And because those kind of stories get my attention. I've watched other short films that are animal related. Why do you think cats make great storytellers and protagonists?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. So the first thing I will say is that certainly my cats, they were very smart. Cats are smart. And I was always impressed by their problem solving ability. So they can encounter a situation, it may be completely strange to them, but they're very methodical about how they go about collecting facts, collecting information about this situation, what is going on. And then once they have made they've put all these facts together in their head, then they make a decision about what to do. And they're actually quite brave. Um, there may, sometimes you see a little bit of caution, but for the most part, they're willing to try things. And so cats are also risk takers. And I think protagonists, unless you're the wimpy kid, maybe you have to be able to be a risk taker. And I suspect that the wimpy kid is sometimes a risk taker himself. And so that's another way of characterizing their curiosity. And and those are definitely two very strong qualities that I observed in growing up in my cats. Um, and I would say lastly that even though they may not always appear to be so, cats are very social. And so they generally like the company of others, other cats, other people, and and you have to have that to be able to tell a good story, because good stories are about relationships as well. So I would say that those are the three characteristics that really drew me to that Icelandic story. And I think growing up with all those cats, just I tried to take kind of little pieces from each of them, each of their personalities, to blend into Chris's personality, and Freya, the female cat that he meets along the way.
Well, speaking of problem solving, uh, this is your first foray into animated film in your career? Am I correct?
That is correct. So I had been very active in theater over the years, and had written a couple of plays, a bunch of short plays. And one of my playwright friends had read one of my, then I started writing short stories, including the original story. Kris the Cat was a short story for this festival, which by the way never happened because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said to me, you really ought to make an animated film out of this other story that I wrote called The Alligator and the Catfish. And um, and 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 then I thought, oh no, that's going to be way too big a challenge. It's just going to be too complicated, way too much. But that idea just kind of stuck in my craw. And then I thought, well, what story do I have that I could kind of convert into a screenplay that would be a short film, like a manageable project? And let me see if I can actually do this. And then I realized, oh, it's Kris the Cat. And so I started working on converting the short story, into the screenplay, and that took about 6 months, really. And then once it was ready, with the help of a lot of input, um, then I went out and okay, what do I need to do this? And I started collecting really a wonderful creative team of people to help me. And the final piece was finding an animator I could afford. And thankfully I found one, and a very talented one at that. And so that's how it all kind of got started. It was about me taking my own risk, and just trying something new, trying something that I didn't know if I could do or not. Um, and and if I couldn't do it, then lessons learned, right? I mean,
Sure.
what's the worst that could happen when you try something and it doesn't quite work out? You just learn from the experience. So I set about doing it, and by this point in time, we were well into the pandemic in 21, and but we were ready to record the dialogue, and so my director and I, we put our heads together and pulled together a very fine cast of actors, and um, and we went into the recording studio, and we were able to do it all, not in one take, but all in one 4-hour session.
Oh,
So it took
oh, wow.
so it took 4 hours to record 13 minutes worth of dialogue. Um, but that's how it goes, and then we just took it from there.
That's and all during the heart of the pandemic. So nothing affects creativity when you don't want it to be affected.
Well, I certainly had a little bit more spare time, but by then it was March of 21, and so the actors had not performed in a year, and they
That's
were
right.
all chomping at the bit, ready to go, and um, and we had complete COVID safety protocols in place. Everyone was wearing masks, which in some cases really helped with the dialogue. Um,
Why is
and
that? Why is that?
well, we were able to get different sound qualities when they were speaking through the mask into the microphone than directly into the microphone. So I thought that was interesting. Our narrator, we were able to put her in a closed sound booth of her own, so she didn't have to worry about that, um, which was a good thing because we found out later that that was really the safest place for her to be. So
Right.
very, very glad about how it all just really worked out, and everyone was so excited. The actors loved the story, and they loved being able to tell it. And so when you have that much enthusiasm for a project, you just can't go wrong.
And when did it premiere?
Well, the animation took about a year, and so it was finally ready in October of 22. And so I started submitting it to film festivals around the world, around the country, and it made its public debut in Dallas in January of this year.
Wonderful. And what was the reception?
Oh, the kids and the parents were both in the room, and I was there as well with them, and so they were very kind and applauded after the film. One little girl came out afterwards, very kind of shyly. She was about, I don't know, maybe 8 years old, and she said, "I really like your film." It was just so cute.
What you can't ask for a better endorsement.
And the parents, laughed at a couple of spots where parents might and kids wouldn't. So that was a nice little bonus as well. So it was well received, and it's been well received at a bunch of festivals now. It's been in 9 different festivals around the world since since then. So I'm very grateful for the reception it's receiving and the interest. And I did it to entertain and to encourage kids to take risks for themselves, um, and to realize that the world has a lot to offer.
Absolutely. And cats have a lot to offer too.
Yes, and yeah, we're in the Halloween season when
Of course.
cats kind of get a bad name, but this is a wonderful celebration of what they can do and what they can bring to a family.
Absolutely. And that's that's why I started this little podcast 6 months ago. It's just how everyday cats that you adopt and adopt don't shop can just make a big difference. And now one is a wonderful film that's warming hearts of people and cats, one of my own. uh, um, I just think it's wonderful that it came from, just a little prompt, a little writing idea, and it turned into this amazing project. So now that you've had your foray into animated film, any thoughts of a sequel?
Well, yes. Um, there's a couple of ways to go with it. I think what I'm really toying around with is an animated series. So maybe just a little 8 or 10 episodes about Chris's life and Chris's cat's family's life. And so I'm definitely toying with that idea. I think the format is such that it's very commercially viable in terms of the artwork and the animation styles. So I think it definitely has that going for it. And now it has a stable cast of characters that can be built upon. So
Right.
I definitely think that there's going to be a sequel in store. I'm also working on a children's book version of the original film, something that's maybe just slightly changed so that it appeals to younger children, a book that parents and children can read together, and but using artwork from the film. So it's very much taken from the film, most of the narration, most of the dialogue from the film, condensed into a 32-page children's picture book. And so that is actively in the works. And I think I've also now gotten the confidence to work on the screenplay of that other story that I mentioned in the beginning, The Alligator and the Catfish, which is also filled with animal characters, um, but focused more on the themes of the environment and teamwork.
I love that. I think that's a wonderful idea, and that it's inspired you to make more stories. I actually, when I was reading everything that Liberty sent me, and then I watched the film, I actually sent it to my friend who has a 9-year-old daughter, and I said, "Go have her watch this, and I want her opinion." And she loved it. So having a book version, I think, is a wonderful idea, because I have a lot of friends with kids of that age that love that although a book might be considered old school in this day and age. I have my notes on an iPad as I'm speaking to you. I think having a physical book is is still something that would appeal. Um, that's my uneducated cat opinion. um,
Well, children's books are still very big business. And so plenty of children are still learning how to read using physical books rather than iPads and Kindles and such. So there's definitely opportunity. There's definitely opportunity there as well. There's a little bee episode in the film, and in an early draft of the book, an author friend of mine read it with her 5-year-old son, and he got fixated on the bee and was buzzing around his house for 2-3 weeks. So so I know that there's something in there for everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how do people find, if they want to watch this, how do they find it? Where is it available to watch?
The easiest way is to just go to kristhecat.net, Kris with a K, all one word. And there you can find viewing options. The trailer is there. And they can also find links to viewing options on the website.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one last question. How many cats do you have now?
Well, sadly, I have none, only because I developed severe allergies to cats. And,
oh no.
And I actually have asthma. And in order to keep the last cat that I did have, I received allergy shots for 5 years just to be able to live with her. And she's passed on now. So she was a Scottish fold.
Oh wow.
She is my last cat, I think.
I understand. I think you've paid your dues in terms of cat ownership in spades. So I completely understand and respect your decision. I have friends with allergies that have come over, and I have 5 after a few minutes. They look at me. I vacuum twice a day, and they look at me. I'm sorry, I can't. So I completely respect your decision. You grew up with 13. I think you're covered in terms of being part of the cat club. And now Kris and all his stories will
Yes.
live on as your virtual cat, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. And so I look forward to more cat stories. I think cats have a lot to offer us and a lot to teach us.
If you could pick like I'm sneaking one last question in, the biggest lesson that you think cats could teach us, if you could pick the top lesson, what would you say that is?
Well, I watched my cats, both the father and the mother of our litter of 6. I watched them raise those kittens, and I think the care and nurturance that cats give their children is definitely something we can learn from.
I could not agree more. Absolutely. Well, Ross, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's just a wonderful story. The email from Liberty, which was one of the most well organized emails I've ever written, by the way. I love bullet points. It just definitely struck with me. I'm so glad that I was able to connect with you. Thank you for bringing Kris to life. And as the series progresses, I wish you luck with that. I'll have you back on to discuss the further adventures of Kris the Cat. So
okay,
thank you so much for joining me, and long live Kris the Cat.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dan the Catman here, and there you have it. Ross Hewitt and the story of Kris the Cat. And Kris the Cat's story will continue in an animated series and children's book. Just awesome. I wish I had that creativity. I have an iPad, I have an Apple Pencil. I could barely do stick figures. So much less, not only to be able to turn this into a wonderful story about the love of cats, but to build a team, to make this into an animated film, and to have such a wonderful reception. Like I said, my Mona watched it and thought it was awesome. A few of my friends have watched it with their kids, and they thought it was just a great cat-centric short film. So it was wonderful. It was wonderful to meet Ross and hear how this great little film came about. Kris the Cat with a K, kristhecat.net. You can read about the film. You can purchase it to watch online, and I think there are various options to watch it online and otherwise. So go do that. And the trailer for the movie's on there as well, so you could watch the trailer. And it's just a great film. I highly recommend watching it. It's just a heartwarming story, awesome animation, awesome everything. It's just a great movie. And I love short films. I love the impact they have. And just because it's a short film doesn't mean that a lot of work and effort and blood, sweat, and tears doesn't go into it. So just a wonderful film. It was great to meet Ross, a fellow New Yorker. Go Bronx. And thank you all for joining me for this episode. And we will see you next week for the next episode of the Shelter Cats podcast. So go cuddle with your cats, give them extra treats, and thank you so much. See you next week.